Okay, so we're combining aggregate demand and aggregate supply to find the equilibrium point, which the equilibrium point of aggregate demand and supply shows us the real output and the real price level. So when we look at these graphs without combining short-run aggregate supply, long-run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand, we know that there are prices, levels, and quantities of real GDP that are produced at each, but we don't know where the economy is, and it doesn't tell us much about that particular state of that economy until we can see the intersection point. So full employment equilibrium exists where aggregate demand intersects with both short-run and long-run aggregate supply at the same point. If all three curves don't intersect at the same point, then we are not, or an economy is not at full employment equilibrium. So you can have intersections of aggregate demand and short-run aggregate supply where they don't intersect at the same point on long-run aggregate supply. And that's going to show us, one of those situations will show us the recessionary gap. Now what you'll notice over here is a recessionary gap exists when equilibrium occurs below full employment output, which makes sense because, as we said earlier, the long-run aggregate supply curve represents the PPC curve when all resources are completely or fully utilized in an economy. And so when we're to the left of the long-run aggregate supply curve, we are not using all of our resources completely, and so we would be underutilizing resources on the PPC curve, which happens during a recession. At the same time, there's an inflationary gap that exists when equilibrium occurs beyond full employment, because we're producing beyond what we have. We've moved past full production and efficient use of our resources, and that's because we have too much money chasing too few goods. And so in the inflationary gap is also not a long-term sustainable area in which to be. So with every other supply and demand graph, we always want to go to equilibrium. Equilibrium point is the best place for an economy. So what happens when you make changes in aggregate demand? You can have a change in consumption. So when you change consumption, you increase consumption, you shift aggregate demand to the right. That increases real GDP, it increases the price level. Unemployment goes down, but inflation goes up. When you change consumption and you decrease consumption, aggregate demand shifts to the left because consumption is a component of aggregate demand. Real GDP or real output goes down, the price level goes down, unemployment goes up, but inflation goes down, or the rate of inflation goes down. So what happens when you change gross private investment? You have an increase in gross private investment, you're going to shift the aggregate demand to the right. Real output or real GDP increases, the price level increases, unemployment goes down, the rate of inflation goes up. You have a decrease in gross private investment, you shift aggregate demand to the left, real GDP or real output goes down, price level goes down, unemployment goes up, and the rate of inflation goes down. Government spending, you're seeing a pattern here, and you should. Government spending goes up, aggregate demand shifts to the right, the real GDP or real output increases, the price level goes up, unemployment rate goes down, and the inflation rate goes up. Decreased government spending, aggregate demand is going to shift to the left, real GDP is going to go down, the price level is going to go down, unemployment will go up, and the rate of inflation will go down. That's what happens when you change net exports. When you change net exports, you increase net exports, aggregate demand goes up, real GDP goes up, price level goes up, unemployment goes down, and the rate of inflation goes. So when net exports decrease, aggregate demand decreases, real GDP also decreases, price level decreases, unemployment goes up, and the rate of inflation goes down. So this is what an increase in aggregate demand looks like graphically. This is what a decrease in aggregate demand looks like graphically. So what happens when you have changes in short-run aggregate supply? You have a change in input prices. So when input prices go down, short-run aggregate supply shifts to the right, real output or real GDP goes up, price level goes down, unemployment goes down, and the rate of inflation goes down. That's what happens when your price level goes down too. Input prices go up, short-run aggregate supply shifts to the left, real GDP goes down, price level goes up, unemployment goes up, and the rate of inflation goes up. Productivity, you have productivity increase, short-run aggregate supply shifts to the right, real GDP goes up, price level goes down, unemployment and rate of inflation also go down. Productivity declines, short-run aggregate supply shifts left, real GDP goes down, price level goes up, unemployment and the rate of inflation also go up. And you have changes in the legal institutional environment. Deregulation shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve to the right. The real GDP goes up, the price level goes down, the rate of unemployment and the rate of inflation also go down. When you increase the amount of regulation, because regulation and compliance costs money, you shift the short-run aggregate supply curve to the left, real GDP goes down, price level goes up, the rate of inflation goes up, and the rate of unemployment also goes up. So this is what it looks like when we increase short-run aggregate supply graphically, or when we increase the short-run aggregate supply graphically. See that you have the input prices go down, productivity goes up, or deregulation occurs, or subsidies as well. Short-run aggregate supply curve shifts right, GDP real output has increased, the price level has gone down, the rate of unemployment has gone down because you are at full employment, and inflation, the rate of inflation has gone down. As you have a decrease in short-run aggregate supply, this is what it looks like graphically. So we see input prices go up, productivity goes down, or regulation occurs. The short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left. Real GDP declines, price level goes up, unemployment and the rate of inflation also increases. So here's your brief summary of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Change in consumption, gross private investment, government spending, and or net exports equals a change in aggregate demand. So if aggregate demand shifts to the right, real output goes up, real price levels go up, or the price level goes up, unemployment goes down, and the rate of inflation goes up. Aggregate demand shifts left, real output goes down, price level goes down, unemployment goes up, and the rate of inflation goes down. A change in input prices, productivity, and or regulation equals a change in the short-run aggregate supply curve. So you have shifted the right to the short-run aggregate supply curve, real output goes up, price level goes down, unemployment and the rate of inflation also go down. Short-run aggregate supply curve shifts left, real output or GDP goes down, price level goes up, unemployment and the rate of inflation go up. So this particular model, working with aggregate demand and aggregate supply, is the most important graph in AP macroeconomics, because every other graph we learn from here and most of our analyses as they relate to federal fiscal and monetary policy are going to tie directly into these graphs. So you need to know it.